Okay, welcome to How to Knock Your Interview Out of the Park in person or remotely. I know that a lot has changed and a lot of interviews are now taking place online, and interviews can already be a stressor for a lot of people. And so I think it will be helpful to not only talk about how to interview, but also how to do this in a remote setting. So a little bit about Career Services. I'm Haley Sims. I've worked in Career Services for 15 years now, and these are some of the ways that we help students. So we help you with career exploration, jobs and internships, how to find them, all the documents that go into getting one of those jobs or internships, as well as thinking about professional school, graduate school. So these are all things that we can help students with. We serve all students and up to a year after they graduate. So this is what we're going to cover, and it's a lot, I know. So for those who like to know what to expect, this is it. This is being recorded. I'm going to send you a copy of the PowerPoint after the presentation, and then you can also find this recording on the Student Success website maybe a week to two after the presentation. Because we have a large group, we have 25 so far, we will have time for questions at the end, and there might be pauses for participation because I definitely want you to get out of this what you're hoping to get from it, and also want to manage the size of our audience. So, remote tips. Someone privately messaged me and said that they have an interview coming up on Monday and it's going to be a remote interview, and so perfect timing. I'm curious, you can use your notifications if you go to the panel and select notifications. How many of you have had a remote interview so far? I'm gonna pull this over here. I'm seeing 1 thumbs up, thank you. 2, 3. Okay, how was it? You can pop it in the chat for us if you like. It's challenge by choice. Okay, good. So we've had 4 people that have had a remote interview. How did it go? No comments. Okay, well, I'll tell you about one. It went well. All right, thank you. My partner actually had a remote interview while we've been in quarantine, and he ended up getting the job. And so it was very stressful because it was new, but it can totally be done. And I'm seeing more from the chat. 3 of you said it went well, so that's great. First thing you want to think about is having your camera at eye level. My laptop is actually placed on top of a box right now so that it can be more up to match my eye level. You want to have light in front of you, but not behind you. If there's light behind you, then that can be really hard on your interviewer to see you. It can create really bright spots and shadows on you. There's a Zoom beauty filter. I don't know if it does much, but might as well check it out. You want to be mindful of your background and what's in it. So nothing too flashy, nothing too personal or distracting. And just because you can use a Zoom background doesn't mean that you should. I have an older laptop, so when I have tried, it won't let me use that feature. And then I've seen some folks on calls where the picture becomes pixelated on their teeth. And so I think if you're going to do that, you need to test it out in advance just to make sure. And of all of this, you want to make sure you're testing this out. Don't wait until the interview to make sure, like, oh no, my camera's too low. Let me grab some books and elevate it. Or, oh, let me take down this distracting poster that's behind me, or something like that. You want to do this in advance. That's going to help you feel more centered when you're going into your interview. Okay, so you want to check your sound background. I know that as I was letting people in, I heard someone mowing their grass, and I thought, who mows their grass in the middle of the day on a Wednesday? But here we are. So you want to make sure that you can control what you can control. So there might be a neighbor's dog barking or people in your kitchen, right? You can't necessarily control the dog barking next door, but you can communicate with people that are sharing your space. In fact, you should. Just before this came on, I could hear my older child on Fortnite yelling. And so I went downstairs and had to have another conversation about the importance of being quiet while I'm presenting. You want to check everything in place. Zoom, how does Zoom work? Or if you're using Skype or WebEx or whatever the platform is, you want to do a practice meeting if possible. That way you're going to be building that confidence. And then, of course, you want to still dress professionally. An interview is still an interview, whether it's virtual or in person. So we'll be getting into that shortly. And then you have to look at the camera to make eye contact. I know that can be a little bit of a challenge, at least for me, to remember to look at the camera, but that's how you're going to feel connected to your interviewer. You want to be ready to mute and unmute yourself quickly and be able to hide your video in case there's an emergency. And so just kind of getting used to that and where those buttons are can be really helpful. You never know what's going to come up. You can certainly upload a professional picture to your Zoom account so that when you hide video, it's still a nice picture. So that's a nice if, but not a must-have. And then, of course, you want to do all of the same interview prep that you would do for any other interview, which is what we're going to get into now. So, any questions about the remote interview tips before we move on to researching the organization? You can pop them in the chat. Does the interviewer normally make the Zoom invite, or would we? Your interviewer should do that for you. Great question. And you want to make sure that you have that logon information, that you're comfortable logging in. Although I will say, if you want to go to Zoom, zoom.us, or even if you're VCU affiliated, there's a VCU Zoom page. You can sign in and you can create your own meetings so that you can test those angles and test sound quality and all of that ahead of time. That way you don't have to wait to use the interviewer's Zoom link to get all of that in place. Great question. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to move on, but do know that we have a Q&A portion at the end as well. So for anything that you're interviewing for, you want to research the organization. You should be able to say why you want to work there. What are they all about? And you can do this in a number of ways. Obviously, you can look at their website, and you can also look at other sources. Maybe you Google them, you look for them. Or have they been mentioned in any news articles lately? Have they won any awards? If they have a strategic plan, look at that. What's their vision statement? What's their mission statement? What components of what they do line up with what you do? And so if you can be clear on that, then it's going to be helpful for you to communicate why you're interested in that role. So this is what I get the most nerves about from students usually, is what do I expect and what kind of questions are they going to ask me and how do I answer these questions? There can be a lot of different formats. For the most part, you're probably going to have a virtual interview one-on-one, but it could also be a panel where there's multiple Zoom boxes on the screen. And so if you have a panel, sometimes it's a little bit scarier. You know, you think, well, why are all these people in here interviewing me? Why are they trying to intimidate me? Not necessarily. It might be that they need someone who is making the decision in this portion of the business. And they have a lot of different stakeholders that want to be there to see how you do and to give input. In fact, it's almost, in my view, better to have a panel, because then you have diversity of opinions and thoughts, and then people will see different things in your candidacy. And so to me, it gives a broader and a better view. I don't think they're going to be inviting you for breakfast or lunch at this time. But if you ever encounter that, you know, this is lifelong. So when you do have a breakfast or lunch interview, It's not really about the food. It's about them asking you questions. So you want to pick things that you can eat without feeling uncomfortable or awkward, because they will continue to pepper you with questions throughout that time. They might do a virtual tour. For all I know, there's a lot of innovation and creativity happening right now. Usually I mention this for face-to-face interviews because you want to be mindful of what shoes you're going to wear. You want to be able to walk around for a tour. If you are touring a lab, you want to have closed-toed shoes, something that you feel confident in. And finally, expect the unexpected. Anything can happen. Your internet could go out. Someone that you share space with could come bursting into your space. It's okay. Take a deep breath and know that you're going to manage it the best that you can in the moment. And the more you prepare, the more confident you're going to feel in that. Questions that typically get answered or asked, or the way that they ask them, are traditional questions like, why are you interested in this role? Tell me about yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? These are just kind of standard questions. Then there's application questions where they want to know, how would you handle yourself in a certain situation? It's like scenarios. Technical experience questions can sometimes come in the form of asking about your experience, right down to actually demonstrating a skill. When I interviewed at another institution, I had to do a taped counseling session with a student, and they wanted to see my skills on the spot and then also be able to share them with others. Atypical questions can consist of just about anything. I'm sure you've heard of these. These are the questions that a lot of times people get a little nervous about. And one of them might be, if you're a piece of playground equipment, what would you be and why? Or a fork or a knife or a spoon, which would you be and why? And I know that this sounds a little bit out there, but what they're doing is seeing how creative you are, and they're also seeing how you respond under stress or under pressure. It's not a normal question. So they want to see, can you roll with it, or do you leave the room crying, right? There's no right answer. There's just a right answer for you, if that makes sense. And then the most common types of interview questions are behavioral interview questions, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And so these are questions, you can identify them because you'll hear, tell me about a time when, or tell me about a time when you worked as a member of a team, or tell me what you would do in this scenario. It's often about past experience, and what they're trying to do is get a sense of how you've acted in the past in order to predict how you're going to act in the future. So what you can do is keep the STAR technique in mind. You might have heard of this before. It's also on our website, and it's right here for you. If you keep situation, task, action, result in mind, that's going to be your guidepost for successfully answering the question. And we'll get into an example of that. I put this last part here. Every interaction with anyone is part of an interview, because it truly is. Whether you're calling to confirm and the person at the front desk is confirming for you, or whether you're going in person and interacting with anyone in the building, all of those people matter and can contribute to giving feedback about whether you get the position or not. So that being said, let's move on to a scenario. So I want you to pretend you're the interviewer. You ask your candidate, tell me about a time when you experienced conflict while working on a team. And this is what your candidate responds with. I worked with a team on a group project for this one class. One of my teammates was not coming to meetings, so we divided up her work. Did you get what you needed? Did you find out? Nope. Oh, I know you. Hey, thanks for coming. Anyone who hears this and says, yep, that's exactly what I was looking for. I can make an educated decision based on this. Y'all are awfully quiet in the chat. Okay. So you want to give a more well-developed answer. So it could be that you use the STAR technique to answer. Now, this is not perfect, but this is an example. So what would be more thorough is to say, in my chemistry lab last semester, we worked in teams to learn lab procedures and study chemical reactions. One of my teammates wasn't doing part of their work, so I spoke to them and asked if she could participate more as a team member and if there were any particular skills she had or areas that she'd like to contribute to. We resolved this problem by reassigning each team member's tasks to work in alignment with their strengths, and we successfully learned each component of the lab. Now, is that something, did you get what you needed in that answer? Yay, all right, good. I'm seeing some thumbs up and some yeses. Okay, good. So I don't think anyone sets out to give the first answer. The first answer tends to come from not having examples in mind. So part of the work that you're going to do is brainstorm what they're looking for and then how you have it. So that's going to help you to be more in tune with being able to apply the STAR technique to your questions or to your answers. So these are some tips for answering all questions. And I guess before we get to that, questions about the STAR technique. I know it's kind of a new thing for some of you.
I just want to say that I spoke to you, Haley, I guess probably now 2 years ago, and you gave me this advice about the STAR technique, and it has served me very, very well. I've passed it on to people I know, and they use it. So I really it's really nice to have a structure for how you answer these types of questions and not have to think about, try to ad-lib it every time. So I recommend it.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it can be daunting, right? To be asked a question and then think, oh gosh, what do I tell you? I don't want to say too much. I don't want to say too little. So for those of us who like structure, it's kind of nice to have those guideposts. Great question in the chat. Explain the difference between the situation and the task. Is situation setting the stage and task is what you were tasked with doing? Pretty much, yes, exactly right. So here, we're setting the stage, right? I was in a chemistry lab semester. We were asked to study lab procedures and study chemical reactions. The task at hand, what we were faced with, almost like the challenge, was that someone wasn't doing their work. So then what did you do about it, right? What was the action that you took? And then what was the result? What if we cannot think of a conflicted situation right away? That is totally fine. This happens all the time. That's a great question. So let's say you don't have an answer for this. Every team you've ever been on has been amazing and no conflict whatsoever. First of all, congratulations. But second, you could say, while I haven't had that happen to me, I think if it did happen to me, this is how I would handle it and walk them through it. So I will often find that is the case with, I'll ask students, tell me about a time when you had a difficulty with a supervisor or instructor. How did you handle it? And some people really have never had a difficulty with a supervisor or instructor. And so they'll say, well, I haven't had that happen yet, but if it did, I think I would talk to them one-on-one and see if I even knew what the conflict was, if it's something that I can influence, or maybe I'm not clear on what they're upset about. And then I would try to find a compromise and talk to that person. So that way you can, it's not as great as having an example, but it could be something that is connected in where you're going. Okay. What if we cannot think of a conflict? Okay, got that question. Any other questions? All right, we're gonna keep going. So tips for answering all questions. It is absolutely okay to pause before you answer. Now with this, I find that I will always think of this one person as a student that we were interviewing. And after every question, he went like this. And he did the thinker pose. And I knew him. I went to undergrad with him. And so I thought, what is he doing? And he answered well, but at the end, after the interview, I said, what was that? And he said, oh, I was told that you're supposed to pause to make it look like you're taking it seriously. So I wanted to show you all that I was taking it seriously. That's not the goal. You can certainly pause, but not for every single question. And it's okay. And in your head, it will feel like forever. It will feel like it has been 5 minutes of silence, but it's really probably only been 10, 15 seconds. And if it helps you to gather your thoughts, then that's perfectly okay. You want to make sure you listen to the question. I've had candidates before that don't listen to the question and answer something that was not what I asked, and I end up having to ask it again. This next one is general, so please don't take this too seriously to heart. I see a question in the chat. Yes, it's okay to write down the question. In fact, I think that that's, I'm a visual learner, and so sometimes when it's a 2-part question, I can't hold that in my head, and I have to write it down to make sure that I don't get sidetracked. Another question is it okay if we need our interviewer to clarify their question if we don't fully understand it or a certain part of it? Absolutely. That shows that you care. That shows that you're invested. So that's great. Oops, got someone else joining us. As a general rule, we keep our answers to about 2 minutes. I'm an extrovert. I tend to go on and on and on and on. It's something that I have to actively work at in an interview. And so I use the 2-minute rule to make sure I'm kind of hitting the highlights, I'm giving a specific example, and then I'm also wrapping it up and moving on. For some folks, the idea of talking for 2 full minutes is terrifying. You know, what if I've said what I need to say? That's okay. You shouldn't be counting in your head simultaneously while also answering the question. It's just a guidepost. Okay. Again, staying focused, avoiding tangents, it's easy to do. And again, this balance of using the STAR technique to stay on point and then wrapping it up. So if I say, tell me about your leadership experience, and you say, soccer, that's too succinct, right? Like, what about soccer? What did you do, right? But you also want to make sure that you're giving full detail. This next one is something that I have struggled with in the past, and I've seen students struggle with it as well. And that is when we haven't been practicing interviewing and we don't know when to stop talking. So what it looks like is, let's say you say, tell me about a time when you worked as a member of a team. And I say, blah, 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 blah. So, and my voice just kind of trails off. When you're the interviewer, we don't know if you're done talking or not. We're listening, we're saying, okay, are they gonna say something else? Are they done with their story? I caught myself halfway through an interview where I was catching myself saying so at the end of every question. If you find yourself doing this, just envision the end of your sentence in mind and work up towards it, and that will help you to wrap things up. You want to avoid sounding rehearsed. This can happen when you've been practicing, but you want to be practiced but also authentic. You don't want to sound like a robot. And the problem when you're too polished is that, let's say they throw you a question that you have not practiced, then all of a sudden, you know, maybe your demeanor changes, your tone changes, and that can be a little bit off-putting during the interview. We've talked about the specific examples. We've talked about varying phrases and not giving vague answers. The other thing here is be honest. I can't tell you how many times I've been doing a mock interview and something doesn't seem right. I get lost in the answer, or something's just kind of not all there. And so I'll follow up after the mock interview and say, what, I got lost on that. Was it this? Is this what happened? Or was it this? And the student will say, I just made that up. I know it's tempting to make something up in the moment, but it's better to say, I haven't had that experience, but this is how I would handle it, than to lie about it. Because when you lie about it, a lot of times it comes across as kind of vague, and it throws off the interviewer. This is a lot of don'ts. Don't be defensive. Don't make excuses. These are things that happen though sometimes. I was interviewing someone last year, and he came off as very defensive. And so that was a surprise to me in an interview as we're trying to get to know someone. You don't want to ruminate on poor answers. Poor answers will happen. It always happens to me, at least. I'll speak from my personal experience. Don't dwell in it. You know, we all stumble, move on, show them that you know what you're doing. I see in the chat a question, how do you respond if you truly don't know the answer for a technical question? Let's go to lab skills, because I've worked with lots of science majors. Sometimes they'll say, do you know about mass spec, right? And you might go, oh, we studied that, but I don't know it. Like, I can't do that right now without any instruction. So you might say, we studied mass spec in my such and such class, and while I'm definitely familiar with the procedure, I would really value some hands-on training from my supervisor before jumping in. I just want to brush up on it and make sure that I'm doing the technique in the appropriate way. Does that answer your question? Or maybe you have another technical question. Okay, cool. Technical, I always go to science for some reason. Okay, so planning ahead. You want to know before the interview, which cover letter did I send? Which resume did I send? Where's the position description? When you're applying to jobs, you always want to save a copy of the position description, whether to Google Docs or a Word copy, whatever, because sometimes they'll take the position description down, and then it's your interview and you don't have anything to go off of anymore. That's a scary place to be. So always save a copy of the position description in case they take it down. This is something that will help too, is just knowing what the format is. My partner was interviewing candidates 2 weeks ago on Zoom, and they somehow didn't tell the candidate that was going to be a Zoom meeting. And I thought that was really strange. Why wouldn't you tell someone that they're expected to turn on their camera and audio? This is not just going to be a phone interview that happens via Zoom, because you can call in with Zoom. So thankfully that candidate was prepared and was dressed professionally and was able to turn on their camera, but it was a complete surprise to them. So asking, what will the interview format be? The agenda, that's probably going to be more for in-person interviews, like if there's a tour or something like that. And then emailing or calling to confirm. You know, sometimes they'll say, hey, are you available on Wednesday? And you go, sure. And then you haven't received anything. You haven't received the Zoom link. You haven't heard anything official. It's okay to reach out. In fact, it shows initiative. So those are okay things to do. But you want to get really in tune with what the job description is and how you can meet things or how you can meet those tasks. So I like to make a chart, and I know that's pretty simple, but a position description has pain points. They're essentially saying, we need help. Can you be the one to help us? So I like to take each part of the position description. They say, we want this, this, and that. And then I write in the other column, I have this, this, and that. And I'll brainstorm examples of how I have that. So that way, when we get into the behavioral interview questions, I will be able to draw from those experiences, and I can make sure that I'm lining up with what they're looking for. It makes it so much easier to prepare for your interview this way too, because oftentimes they will take the job description and then they will create questions based on the job description. So they will make sure if they want someone who has these certain skills, they're going to ask a question like, tell me about a time when you used these skills. You want to silence your phone, you want to move it, you want it to not distract you. Like clockwork, every time I'm in a staff meeting, that is when a group text starts blowing up. And, I find myself looking, and that's distracting. Same thing for an interview. You want to have water nearby just in case you're going to be doing a lot of talking and you want to stay hydrated. Great question. I understand using the chart for practice. If you were in person, would it be okay to have it with you? Absolutely, and here's how. I should have brought my Padfolio. I do not have it up here. In fact, it's probably at VCU. So a Padfolio is kind of a fancy leather folder, and you can carry copies of your questions for the interviewers in there, copies of your resume, and that is a great place for you to take notes on what they say. And it's also a place where you could sneak that chart into a folder. As a matter of fact, when I was interviewing, I snuck that chart into the folder. And before the interview started, I sat down, I opened my Padfolio, and I could see, I pulled the chart out and just left it there. They didn't know what it was, because I knew I was going to freeze up because it was really important to me. And so when they said, tell me about a time when you have shared the goals of student success, I froze. I've been doing this forever. And I thought, okay, take a deep breath, glance at your chart, you got it. So having multiple bullet points of how you've done these things before, all I had to do was glance at the bullet point. I didn't have well-developed answers, because you will never say it as well as you can write it. Y'all, please believe me, I have done this probably 3 times now for phone interviews, where I will write out how I think, what questions they will ask me and how I think I should answer it, and it's never exactly the same. And so it ends up sounding kind of strange. So yes, you can for sure bring that chart. Okay, let's move on. I wanted to make a poll, but I haven't made a poll before. So just pop your answer into the chat. How do you prepare for the interview? Do you A, practice, B, talk about what the interview is going to be like with a friend, C, ask friends about interviews they've been on, or D, just go in confident? All right, I'm seeing A, C, A through C, A. All right, looks like a lot of A's. Okay. Oh, I love it. I love how much y'all are participating. The answer is A, and certainly you can do B and C, but you don't want to do just B and C. You don't want to trick yourself into thinking that just talking about something is going to be as good as practicing. I cannot tell you how many people I will say, let's do a mock interview. And they'll say, no, I don't, I really just don't want to do that. I'm just going to go in confident. And so my question to you is, how many of you have played a sport or a musical instrument? You can show me with the waving of the hands, gestures. Yep, seeing some thumbs up. Okay, good. Now, I want you to imagine that you go to the very first game of the season, or you go to the end of your recital for your instrument, and you have never been to practice. Do you feel that sick feeling, those bad chills? Yes, that is not something we want to do. And interviewing is the same thing. Practicing is like going to practice for your instrument or your sport. The interview itself is the recital or the game. So we've got to go in prepared. And just because it makes us anxious or nervous to do it doesn't mean that we shouldn't. So with that being said, how do we prepare? I believe in having lots of little steps to get you to the finish line. So we have some commonly asked interview questions on our website. We've got interview prep, common questions, behavioral interview, all the details, right? on our site. We also have our career and industry pathways. So let's say I want to get ready for an education interview. Let's say my internet doesn't want to work. Okay, so then I might say, well, how can I get ready for those specific questions? And we have questions on here as well. Okay, the next step would be using InterviewStream. This is a free service that we have through VCU where you can log into your Handshake account, you go to the resources page, and then you can either watch experts answering questions or you can conduct your own interview, and you can choose from these pre-made interview questions, or you can just put it on a random mode. You can even curate your own list. There's over 7,000 questions that are pre-recorded in the database. And what I love about InterviewStream is that it gives you kind of the nervous feeling of interviewing, that it makes the stakes feel high so that you actually practice, but with none of the risk. So the interviewer comes on, they're pre-recorded, they ask the question, you answer it, and then you get to play it back and you get to see what you look like when you're interviewing. It's really helpful. You can do it as many times as you like. You can send the recordings of your interview to people for feedback. There's lots of options there. And finally, you can schedule a mock interview with us. If you're a current student or an alum for up to a year out, you can make an appointment with us. We do mock interviews all the time for grad school, professional school, jobs, scholarship interviews, all of it. So we would love to help you with getting ready for your interview. What should I wear? Ugh. Interviewing can be stressful, right? What do I wear? What do I pick? I wore this blazer for you today so I could model what I was going to be talking about. A lot of times we suggest business professional, which means a suit if you have it. Some fields that would not fly, like if you're going into creative advertising and you wear a suit, that's just not a fit. They're more like snappy casual, so they're very put together, but not a formal suit. So you want to get to know what your industry is. A lot of times I hear students say, well, you know, it's for a landscaping job, so I don't need to dress up for that because I'm going to be wearing a t-shirt every day. It's still good to dress up and put your best foot forward so that they know that you're taking it seriously. Once you have the job, you can assess, okay, this is what everyone wears, this is what's appropriate. So just because I don't wear a suit every day at work doesn't mean that I wouldn't wear a suit for an interview. We have the Suit Yourself closet. It's in our office in the Student Commons, and we will be having Suit Yourself hours this fall. So you can check our website for what those hours will be. It's all volunteer-based, donation-based, and so you can donate clothes to Suit Yourself, you can use clothes from Suit Yourself, and they're yours to keep. So once you get them, you don't have to return them, they're yours. So some tips on professional attire. You want to make sure nothing is wrinkled. You want to make sure your clothing fits properly. That's going to make you feel more confident. And you might think, well, what does it matter if I'm remote? It still matters. It can make a big difference in how confident you feel. You want to avoid flashy jewelry, anything that's going to be noisy or distracting. You want to be mindful of the season that you're in. This next one, I think, is so different for every person. So what I would say is make sure that your haircut and your facial hair, if you have it, are what make you feel at your best. It's your most professional self, and that's going to be different for everyone. And I think it can be tricky when some of us don't feel like we can go get a haircut, but you want to be, you're putting on your best professional self. You want to make sure that your clothing is appropriate and not too revealing. I got a little bit nervous about wearing this print because I attended a webinar last week that said you should only wear solid colors and not patterns. So being mindful of not having anything that's too distracting, wearing colors that flatter your skin tone. If you wear makeup, making sure it looks natural and not overdone because everything on Zoom or WebEx or Skype, everything is larger. It's, you know, even hand gestures are bigger on Zoom than they would be in person. So, questions about dress before we move on to first impressions. All right, we'll move on to first impressions. So handshakes, not going to happen. Maybe not ever again. I'm just kidding. But your first impression can definitely make a difference. It can show them that you are excited to be there and wanting to put your best foot forward. So you want to make sure that you're greeting them, you're mindful of your posture, your body language. If I'm slumped over like this, I'm not going to be showing that I'm interested. So you want to roll your shoulders back and almost envision that you have like a string through your spinal cord. It'll help you to sit up and have good posture. Facial expressions. These get me in trouble a lot. I'm very expressive, and so you can oftentimes tell what I'm thinking. So if you also have this concern, you want to be mindful of your facial expressions. But that can also be a great thing because it could mean that you're smiling and you're making eye contact and you're showing them warmth even though you're not physically there. And I'm sure you've heard this, it's not what you're saying, it's how you say it. And that's a big part of this. What's your tone? What's your body language? How do you think this individual feels? You can pop it in the chat. Powerful, great, pumped up. You said yeet. Victorious, accomplished, powerful and strong. Yes, good. Those are all great answers. Yes, he looks like he just maybe made a goal to me. Like I think he's wearing a soccer outfit. So he looks like he's just really powerful and strong. And if you haven't heard of power poses, I would highly recommend this TED Talk by Amy Cuddy. Some of us have trouble with anxiety for interviews, and that's normal. A lot's at stake. You're going to be nervous about it. And so rather than saying, oh, I'm nervous and letting that self-talk get to you, instead, I want you to practice power poses. So when he does this, it makes him feel victorious. I know in this case, he might feel victorious and that's why he did this. However, you can trick your body into feeling more confident. If you do the big, Superwoman, Wonder Woman pose in the bathroom before you go in real life or face-to-face, or even just off screen before you get onto your interview, that's going to flood your body with testosterone, and testosterone makes you more confident. The mind-body connection is huge. So if you are trying to manage anxiety, power poses are a great way to do that. And this is something else I wanted to share with you because I'm a big fan of science. When we are in a high negative state, that's called anxiety, and we're feeling anxious. So maybe we're about to go into an interview or give a presentation, and we say, oh, I'm so anxious. And what do people tell you to do? They tell you to calm down, right? They might as well tell you nothing. It is harder to go from a high negative state to a low energy positive state. It's the hardest transition to make. However, it's easier to go from a high negative state to a high positive state. So if you find that you're nervous, name it. Say things like, I'm just so excited to be here with you today, because that nervous energy is then labeled as excitement or, like I'm so excited about this opportunity. Then they think, oh, they're really invested in this interview. So it's okay to tell yourself you're excited, and then it's easier for your body to make that transition. So this question is something I get a lot. When I'm interviewing people, especially mock interviews or student interviews, I'll say, well, what questions do you have for us? And the response I get a lot is, I think I'm good, right? And I get it. I've been in interviews where it's like, I just want to be done. I just want to get out of here and take this suit jacket off and eat something, right? Um, but it's really important that you have questions ready for them. It shows your interest. It shows that you have been thinking about what you will look like in this role. It shows that you are thinking strategically about how you're going to do well in this role. So, in reading the position description, you might have some questions that have already come up, and you write those down and have them in your Padfolio. And then if you are just struggling, you don't know what else to ask, these are some questions that I like to ask. This one is a feel-good question. What do you like working about here? People say, oh, you know, I love this, and then they associate those positive feelings with you. And that's not a bad thing in an interview. The other thing is that you are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. And so you want to make sure that whatever's important to you, you're asking a question around it. So you might say, well, what's the culture of your team? So when we're asked that in career services, we will say things like, we're a family, we're a ramily, we care about each other, we love to laugh in the hallway and maybe too loud sometimes. And it's just a really positive culture. If you ask that question and there's silence and people are looking around at each other like they don't know what to say, that might be a sign of what their work environment is actually like. What's the next step of the process is one of my favorite questions. It's the one that's going to save you from a lot of concern later on in the process. So if this is not in a big group setting that you would ask this would usually be at the very end of the day when you're with the person that's the decision maker, or in this case, if you've gone from a group panel on a remote interview to just one-on-one with the hiring manager. You could say, you know, I really enjoyed my time today. I was interested in this position before, but now I'm even more interested. Tell me, what's the next step in the hiring process? And that's a nice way of finding out what to expect. They might say, we're interviewing more candidates next week. We hope to make a decision by the end of the month. We'll call you if you're the next candidate. So then if by the end of the month they haven't called, you can start kind of going, okay, well, maybe it's not me, or maybe it's their first candidate, but they're waiting to hear back if that person's accepted. And maybe I'm their second choice, but they can't tell me that until they secure the first candidate. There can be all kinds of things in play. You want to avoid asking about holidays or money, because even though those are valid questions, they're often things that you can find out about the holidays on the HR website a lot of the times. But it's also, you want them to see that you are interested in the job for what the job is. You don't want it at all to come across that, you know, you're just here for the paid vacation or the money. Both are important, but something that you would get to more in the salary negotiation phase. So when it's over, celebrate, get excited, and then get to work. You want to write thank you notes. Those can be physical thank you notes. I love a good email thank you note where you're reiterating that what you enjoyed about the time that you spent with them, what you're interested in about the job. If you didn't get everyone's emails and you can't send individual emails, you can always send it to your main contact and ask that they share it with others. You want to write notes from your interview. I love this one because I don't know about you, but my negative self-talk gets in the way after an interview. And so I will start ruminating on the one question that I didn't answer well, and then I'll convince myself that the whole thing was awful. And so if you write notes, they asked me this question, this is what I said. Then when those self-doubt talk, when that creeps into your head, you can squash that and review your notes and have evidence that, yeah, you messed up that one question, but you did great on the others. How would you respond if they ask you about salary during the primary interview? I think that's going to be dependent on what kind of job it is. If it's a part-time federal work study job, you might say, you know, I'm looking for this range of whatever your range is, $8 to $10 an hour, whatever it would be. If it's for a salaried position, it's a full-time first job, I would be hesitant to talk about that. You can say things like, well, I'd be interested in hearing what your offer would be and making sure that it's commensurate with my experience. A lot of times you can give a range. I am hesitant to give a range until extended an offer. And here's why. Maybe I was the best candidate, but then my range is too high. And so they say, oh, we're not going to offer it to her. We'll offer it to this other person who's cheaper, right? I don't want to lose out on an opportunity because I gave a range too soon. You can't negotiate what you don't have. And so I'm hesitant to negotiate until they've extended an offer. And salary negotiations could be a whole other PowerPoint and talk. And in fact, we do have salary negotiation worksheets and guides on our website, or if they're not there, they're coming soon because we just worked on them. Great question. Let's see, you want to prepare for a second interview. Sometimes you have a phone interview and then the in-person or the virtual one is coming. And then I would say keep applying, keep going after things. Sometimes we get our heart set on one federal work study job and we say, oh, that one's perfect for me. You want to keep applying. You want to not put all your eggs in one basket. And it's okay to follow up, and here's how. You don't want to feel like you're harassing them. You know, if they said we're going to make a decision by the end of July and it's now August 1st, you could call. So it's okay, but keep their answer to the timeline question in mind. And if you get an offer from your first choice before you've heard, or sorry, if you get an offer from your second choice before you've heard back from your first choice, it's okay to call them and say, hey, I have another offer. Just wanted to let you know you're my first choice. Is there anything you can do about that? Sometimes that can expedite the process and they can go ahead and get an offer out to you. Other times they won't be able to, and you're going to have a tough decision to make. These are ways that you can connect with us. We would love to see you in virtual appointments this fall. You can follow us on the socials. You can call our front desk. That number is working. And finally, these are some fairs that we have coming up this fall. They're all going to be virtual, but there are a variety of opportunities here. They're for part-time jobs, internships, full-time jobs, and we would love to see you there. There's more details on this link, and you will be getting a copy of the PowerPoint if you registered, so that's coming your way. I would ask that you open a browser and fill out the survey. Give me some feedback so I can see what went well and what I can do better on. And at this time, are there any questions? I'm going to move the question box here. Y'all are so quiet. You're welcome. Oh, I'm so glad that was helpful. Yes, we do mock interviews for those applying to residency. We would love to help you with that. How do you feel about this question? What does success look like in this position? I love that, because then you can kind of get some of those ideas of what's this person's expectation? What does success look like in the first 3 months, 6 months, first year? How will I know that I've been successful by the time I have my first year evaluation? That's an excellent question. Any other questions? Ooh, the weaknesses question. I feel you. All right, here's the strategy. Some people will say, well, don't give them a weakness. Just tell them a strength and make it seem like it's a weakness. I'm not a huge fan of that because I see that happen a lot. The number one answer I have seen is people will say, well, sometimes I'm a perfectionist, and so I just spend so much time making things perfect. That's not a weakness, right? Give me an honest answer and tell me what you're doing to work on it. So mine is, sometimes I'm so detail oriented that it is very easy for me to miss the big picture. And because I know this about myself, I like to block time in my calendar on a weekly and monthly basis to kind of zoom out and see, are all these details, are all the things I'm spending my time on, are they connected to what I'm supposed to be doing in my role, in my department at VCU? So that's my honest answer. And it's also showing that I'm doing something about it. You don't want to just leave them hanging. Like, you don't want to say, I hate people, right? Like that might be a deal breaker for them, right? Especially if it's a customer service role. So you want to give an honest answer and say what you're doing about it. What if you haven't heard back from a company and they said they will let you know if you will be invited for a second interview? Great question. So this actually happened to my partner, right? So he had asked that question of, well, when will I hear? And it was past that deadline. And so he had started telling himself, oh, it's not going to be me. It's probably not me. And then they called. So sometimes, you know, it depends on time of year, right? I told him, I said, look, we're in COVID. People are on vacation. They're trying to make decisions. They're all virtual. It's a lot of factors. They gave you their hopeful timeline, but maybe it's not the end all be all. It's okay to follow up and say, hey, I'm still very interested in this position. Could you tell me more about the hiring timeline, or whether you've hired a candidate? No, nothing wrong with that. Just following up. Good question. All right, y'all. Well, I know that we are at 11:01. If you have to go, feel free. Thank you so much for coming to this presentation. And if anyone has any other questions, I'll hang out for a few minutes. Oh, thank you. All right, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and stop.